Is Israel setting its sights on Turkey next? Here's why this question is sparking serious debate. Think the Middle East can't get any more tense? Just hours after Israel carried out airstrikes against Qatar, a Gulf nation with close U.S. ties, attention among some pro-Israel figures quickly swiveled to Turkey. And this is where speculation turns heated. In the U.S., Michael Rubin, a senior member of the conservative American Enterprise Institute, floated the bold idea that Turkey could become Israel's next target. More strikingly, he cautioned against assuming NATO would automatically shield Turkey if tensions escalated. This raised a vital question. Can long-standing alliances truly be relied upon in such a volatile region? Social media echoed these anxieties. Israeli academic and political personality Meir Masri bluntly stated, "Today Qatar, tomorrow Turkey." Ankara didn't hesitate to fire back. In an unusually blunt response, a key advisor to President Recep Tayyip Erdogan issued harsh words aimed squarely at Israel, suggesting lasting peace for the world would only come with Israel's erasure, a comment almost guaranteed to ignite further controversy. If you've noticed pro-Israel media growing more critical of Turkey, you're not alone. Over the last several months, the rhetoric has intensified. Turkey is regularly painted as Israel's biggest regional foe. Commentators point to everything from Ankara's activities in the eastern Mediterranean to its involvement in rebuilding post-war Syria, labeling them as emerging threats to Israel's interests. Against the backdrop of Israel's ongoing military operations in Gaza, Ankara made a decisive move in August. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan announced a suspension of all economic and trade relations with Israel. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It underlined just how strained relations were becoming. So what's really fueling Ankara's concerns? According to Ömer Özkizilçik, a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council, Turkish officials view Israel not just as an adversary, but as a state aiming for regional dominance with the full backing of Washington. The recent Israeli strikes on Qatar further amplified Turkey's doubts about how far U.S. protection under NATO might really extend. Even though Qatar enjoys privileged status as a U.S. ally, American officials offered little resistance to Israel's attacks. This has triggered worrying questions. Would the U.S. genuinely intervene if Turkey found itself under similar threat? Here's the part many overlook. Unlike some Middle Eastern countries, Turkey realized early on that it couldn't depend solely on U.S. or NATO for its own defense. That awareness is coloring Ankara's entire approach to Israel's policies. Adding fuel to the fire, Israel's own Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, speaks increasingly openly about his ambitions for regional expansion. When recently pressed about the concept of a greater Israel, his answer was unequivocal. Absolutely. For Turkish leaders, such statements go far beyond rhetoric. They hint at a vision of Middle Eastern dominance that clashes directly with Turkey's strategic vision. Turkish Foreign Minister Fidan voiced grave concerns about the so-called Greater Israel concept. According to him, Israel's true aim is to keep neighboring countries weak, ineffective, and fractured, thereby cementing its supremacy. Religious Zionists often define Greater Israel as an expanse that absorbs territory from modern Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Egypt. How's that for controversy? Recent Israeli military activity only compounds Ankara's fears. In the past few weeks alone, Israel has sustained its punishing campaign against Gaza, now widely denounced as genocidal, launched raids in the West Bank, attacked targets inside Yemen and Syria, and has even been accused of striking a Gaza aid convoy as far away as Tunisia. Turkey increasingly sees itself as caught up in Israel's widening ambitions. Özkizilçik notes that this is part of a bigger pattern, an ongoing geopolitical rivalry between Turkey and Israel. Israel's actions clash with Turkey's priority of building strong, centralized states rather than weak, fragmented ones, an important but often overlooked distinction. Region-wide power play July brought yet another stunning admission. Tom Barrack, the U.S. ambassador to Turkey and a special envoy to Syria, publicly stated that Israel actually prefers a divided, weakened Syria. In his words, united Arab countries are seen as the primary threat to Israel's security. This is a viewpoint that likely raises hackles not just in Ankara, but throughout the region. Israel's actions seem to match its rhetoric. After former Syrian President Assad escaped to Moscow, Israel bombed Syria relentlessly and seized chunks of territory in the Golan Heights. In 2024, Israel decimated much of Hezbollah's leadership. It still occupies parts of Lebanon, despite a ceasefire, underlining its determination to keep rivals in check. Perhaps most shockingly, Israel conducted attacks inside Iran earlier this summer, igniting a 12-day conflict that struck military and nuclear facilities and killed senior Iranian officials. Analysts believe these strikes were designed not only to undermine Iran militarily, but to prod Washington toward regime change in Iran itself. Now, many experts believe Israel's attention could soon turn toward Turkey. There's been open resistance from Israel to any Turkish presence or bases in post-war Syria. Netanyahu has made it clear that Ankara won't be permitted to establish new footholds that could challenge Israel's security. Retired Turkish Admiral Cem Gerdeniz, architect of the Blue Homeland Maritime Doctrine, predicts the first direct military flashpoints will erupt in Syria, both on land and in the air. He also warns that Israel's growing military ties with Cyprus and Greece look to Ankara like an attempt at encirclement. Why does this matter? Because the enmity over Cyprus, still divided between its Greek and Turkish sectors, remains among the most stubborn obstacles in Turkish foreign policy. Last week's reports that Cyprus is set to acquire Israeli air defense systems are ringing dangerous alarm bells in Ankara. In the context of Syria, Israel and Turkey have drastically different goals. Israel wants a fragmented, federal Syria with regions controlled by different groups. Turkey, meanwhile, firmly supports a single, strong Syrian government. This fundamental disagreement keeps tensions simmering. Still, not everyone thinks major conflict is inevitable. Gökhan Sinkara, head of Necmettin Erbakan University's Global and Regional Studies Center, describes current Turkish-Israeli tensions as managed, not uncontrolled. But here's the catch. If Syria's internal instability boils over, it could quickly draw in regional powers. Sinkara warns that Syria's weak security infrastructure makes any potential ethnic or sectarian clashes tough to contain, raising the risk of a drawn-out chaotic conflict. Red lines and new risks. Netanyahu, by contrast, is pushing for a Balkanized Syria, broken into mini-states along ethnic and religious lines, especially demilitarizing southern Syria, where the Druze population is concentrated. If pursued, this approach could embolden other groups, such as Kurds and Alawites, to demand their own autonomy.